It's 1492, and Spain is on the brink of a massive change. You might think I'm talking about Columbus sailing the ocean blue, but no. I'm referring to a royal decree that would alter the face of Spain and the world forever. The Alhambra Decree, a document that turned the lives of thousands upside down and reshaped an entire nation. On March 31st, 1492, King Ferdinand, II of Aragon and Queen Isabella, I of Castile put their royal seal on a document that would go down in history as the Alhambra Decree. It was basically a royal eviction notice for all practicing Jews in Spain. The decree gave the Jewish community a pretty grim ultimatum: convert to Catholicism or pack your bags and leave Spain for good. They weren't given much time to decide. The deadline was July 31st, 1492. Just 4 months to uproot your entire life. Talk about a tight schedule. Spain had just come out of this long period called the Reconquista, where Christian rulers had been fighting to take back control from Muslim, African and Arab rulers. They had just won a centuries-long religious tug-of-war and wanted to make sure everyone knew it. Convert or leave, those were your only choices. The Jews who chose to leave weren't allowed to take any gold, silver or minted money with them. Talk about adding insult to injury. Here's the text of the decree issued by Ferdinand. II of Aragon and Isabella, the Vine of Castile, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, by the grace of God, King and Queen of Castile, Leon. Aragon, Sicily, Granada, Toledo, Valencia, Galicia, Majorca, Seville, Sardinia, Cordova, Corsica, Murcia, Jaén, the Algarve, Algeciras, Gibraltar, and the Canary Islands, and Count and Countess of Barcelona, Lords of Biscay and Molina, Duke and Duchess of Athens and Neopatria, Counts of Roussillon and Cerdagne, Marquises of Oristano and Goziano. Whereas, following the advice of our counselors and prelates, the great harm that has been done to our holy Catholic faith by the continuing interaction of the Jews with the Christians, who have been led astray and corrupted by their communications, it is resolved that all Jews and Jewesses in our kingdoms and dominions shall depart without hope of return under pain of death and confiscation of their property.
1. All Jews and Jewesses must depart from our kingdoms by July 31st, 1492, taking with them their possessions without harm to their persons, provided they do not take gold, silver, or minted money. 2. They must sell their houses, land, and belongings, and settle their debts before leaving. 3. If they convert to the Holy Catholic faith, they shall be allowed to remain in their homes, enjoying all the rights and privileges of other faithful Christians. Those who violate this edict shall face the penalty of death and confiscation of their goods. Issued in Granada on March 31st, 1492, in the year of our Lord. This decree forced the expulsion of approximately 200,000 Jews from Spain and marked one of the most significant turning points in Spanish history. The impact was huge. Spain lost a significant chunk of its merchants, doctors, and scholars. It was like a medieval brain drain. But the story doesn't end there. These expelled communities spread out across Europe, North Africa, and the Ottoman Empire. Ambrósio Gomez, Diogo de Teive, Manuel Cardoso, Isaac de Castro Tartas, Moses ben Solomon of Loulé, Black Portuguese Jews hunted down in Africa and the Americas transported back to Portugal and executed. Interestingly, some even ended up in places like the newly discovered Americas. Talk about a plot twist. This event ended up reshaping Jewish communities worldwide. In Marin Sanuto's work published in 1588, a Jewish state is distinctly marked as Land of the Jews on Tabula X of his African maps. This territory is shown extending south of the equator, surrounded by mountains and occupying a significant area. Sanuto's depiction highlights how cartographers of the time combined geographic knowledge with historical international elements, often based on travelers' accounts and oral traditions. This depiction aligns with accounts of Jewish migrations to Africa, including the forced exile of Jews by King John II of Portugal in 1492. During this period, Jews were expelled to the island of São Tomé, discovered in 1471, as well as to other Portuguese settlements on the African continent. These exiled communities became the ancestors of the Jewish populations in places like Loango, where they were despised even by local African populations. John Pori, the English translator of geographical texts, engaged with such narratives, further emphasizing the belief in Jewish settlements within Africa. This fascinating intersection of legend, geography, and forced migrations points to the long-standing Jewish presence in Africa and its connection to exile, trade, and diaspora history. The Lançados, those who were thrown out or the castaways, were often Portuguese Sephardic Jews or other exiles who settled along the West African coast. During the 15th and 16th centuries, fleeing persecution, including forced conversions and the Inquisition, they became integral to trade networks between Africa, Europe, and the Americas, often assimilating into local African societies. The term Black Portuguese typically refers to lançados or tangomos, Portuguese settlers or traders, often of mixed African and European descent, who integrated into African societies along the West African coast, including the Congo region. These individuals often intermarried with local African populations, forming a unique cultural and social group. Lançados, the castaways? Many were Portuguese settlers, including Jewish exiles fleeing persecution during the Inquisition. They settled along the West African coast, including in Guinea, Sierra Leone, Senegal, and the Congo. By intermarrying with local African elites, they became cultural intermediaries and influential figures in trade networks. Tangomos, a related group of Afro-Portuguese traders and settlers who emerged from the Luso-African intermixing. They often held prominent positions in local African societies due to their connections to European trade and access to firearms. The marriage alliances. Lançados frequently intermarried with local African elites, integrating into ruling classes and strengthening trade relationships. Even after being exiled and many enslaved, they were still targeting Jews of Africa. The Inquisitions sought to root out Jews who had fled Iberian persecution. Even after reaching Africa, these Jewish communities were not safe from European Christian powers. Christian-African alliances. European powers often allied with African leaders, incentivized by firearms, alcohol, and countless European slave women. Sometimes collaborated to capture Jews and Luso-Africans. In Angola and Mozambique, Jews fleeing persecution in Iberia faced forced conversions and raids. In the Kingdom of Congo, Christian missionaries targeted Jewish merchants and their families, accusing them of heresy. Lançados and their descendants facilitated trade in gold, ivory, copper, and enslaved people between African kingdoms and European powers. Through intermarriage and alliances, they played critical roles in diplomacy and governance, leaving a lasting impact on African societies. The Black Portuguese, particularly the Lançados, created a lasting legacy in West and Central Africa by blending African and European cultures. Their descendants contributed to the unique Luso-African identities still present in modern-day Angola, Congo, Guinea-Bissau, and other parts of Africa. This being much of the very foundation that sparked the slave trade, nations playing off each other's divisions and fighting for survival. For in these days there was no glory in being known as a Jew, only that it was your natural birthright. And this being one of the very reasons many Jews being captured were castrated to utterly destroy the very mark of the circumcision of the seed of Abraham. The castration of Jewish men during the time of the Inquisition as a means to erase their circumcision, a religious mark of Abraham, is documented in some historical accounts. This practice was tied to the brutal methods used to suppress Jewish identity. One such reference comes from the historian Cecil Roth, who wrote in A History of the Marranos, 1932, in certain cases, Jewish men accused of secretly practicing their faith were subjected to mutilation, including castration, as an attempt to destroy the physical sign of their covenant with Abraham. This was part of the broader effort of the Inquisition to erase all traces of Jewish heritage. Additionally, Yirmiyahu Yovel's The Other Within, the Marranos 2009, explores the persecution of conversos and mentions that mutilation was sometimes used to further humiliate and sever Jewish ties. The mark of circumcision, regarded by the inquisitors as the ultimate proof of a man's hidden Jewishness, made conversos a target for extreme forms of violence. Some records speak of attempts to reverse or obliterate this mark through mutilation, reflecting the lengths to which persecutors would go to annihilate Jewish identity. Both sources highlight the extreme measures undertaken by the Inquisition to target Jewish men and eliminate visible markers of the ancestral descendants of the lineage of Abraham. In our next video, please join us as we go deeper into the lives of the Black Portuguese who were captured in Africa and taken back to Portugal to face their ultimate ends. These very histories shaping the world as we know it. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.